Hello everybody, welcome to Thursday's lesson. Okay, today we're going to be looking at two things. One of them is going to be just to start by continuing with what we were doing yesterday, which was to find those familiar fractions of numbers. So we had 25%, we had 50%, we had 100%, we had 1%, we had 75%. So those are our familiar fractions. We're just going to start with this briefly. So our question here is, how could you calculate 10% of 16? Now, what I could do is what's suggested here. You could find 1% and multiply that by 10. And it says to do that, we do 100 I divide 100 to find one. I divide by 100 to find 1%. So I would be doing 16 divided by 100. That would give me my 1%, and then I times that by 10 to get 10%. That's a very long-winded way of doing it, so I'm not going to do that. What I'm actually going to do is just straight away find 10%. We can do that by the method we looked at yesterday. To find 10%, if you remember, so we're finding 10% of 16, or 10% times 16. Remember, they're the same thing. To find that that percentage, I need to divide by 10. If you look at the diagram, you can see that 10% of 100 is 10. To find that, I would do 100 divided by 10. So what I need to do is the calculation 16 divided by 10, and that will give me my 10%. So I'm going to get my place value chart up again. We're going to go into the decimals. Okay, we got quite close to the bottom of the page. I hope I've got enough room here. So I start with 16. We're dividing by 10. 10's got 1 0 on the end, which means we're moving one place. And because we're dividing, we're getting smaller. So our 6 is going to move one place to the right. Remember, we don't include the decimal point column. That stays where it is. So we move one place to the right. So my 6 is going to move to here. My 1 is going to move to here. 16 divided by 10 is 1.6, which means 10% of 16 is 1.6. Okay, we can do that with all sorts of numbers. 32, if we want 10% of 32, I would need to divide 32 by 10. That would be 3.2. If I wanted 10% of, let's do a trickier one, 10% of 7.3, which means it's already a decimal. I've still got to move the one place to the right, so I would end up with 0.73. If I want 10% times 3, I've got to move my 3 one place to the right. That would give me 0.3. If I wanted 7 times 10%, I would need to divide 7 by 10, move it one place to the right, 0.7. So that's my finding the 10% that we showed you yesterday. And as a reminder, can you remember how to find 1%? Instead of dividing by 10, we're going to divide by 100. So to find 1%, which is what this page is about here, if the whole was 16, what would 1% be? 1% is 1/100th of the whole. So I've got to divide my 16 by 100. So to divide 16 by 100, instead of moving it one place, you're going to move it 2 places. So we've got our tens, ones, tenths, hundredths, I might even need a thousandths column. So we had 16. We're going to move that 2 places. 1, 2. I didn't need my thousandths column. Good to be sure. 1, 2. And of course, I must have a placeholder. So you're moving it 2 places. If you're doing, if you are doing 47, if we want 1% times 47, we divide it by 100. So we're moving it 2 places to the right. So it won't be 4.7, it will be 0.47. If we want 3 times 100, 1%, you can tell I'm tired. 3 times 1%, we're dividing 3 by 100. So I will be moving my 3 2 places to the right, which would give me not 0.3, but 0.03. So that's my 1%. Okay, so what we're going to look at now is this section down here, how we could use these to calculate other percentages. Okay, so I know that, I'm not going to use this one. Let's go back to our 16. If I know 10% of 16, so 16 times 10%, I'm trying to use times and of either one interchangeably so you can see that it's both the same thing, was 1.6. If I know 16 times 10%, do I know 20% of 16? What would I need to do to my 10% in order to find 20%? I could just double it. Now, doubling decimals is tricky, but I know that double 16 is 32. So to double 1.6, it must be 3.2. Fabulous. If I know that 1% of 16 was equal to 0.16, could I work out 2% of 16? I would just need to double 1%, which again, I know double 16 is 32, so I'm going to double my decimal, 0.32. I could work out 3% by starting with 0.32 and adding another 1.6 to it. So 3 lots of 16. I could do 4 lots of 16, 0.16. I could do 5 lots of 0.16. So you can use your familiar fractions to work out all sorts, 2%, 20%. This one's really interesting. 99%. How would you work out 99%? What you could do, let's have a look. What you could do is think, right, 10% of or times 16 was 1.6. Now, if I do that 9 times, so if I then do that times, 1.6 times 9, that would give me 90%. And then I could do 1% of 16 was 0.16. And then that's 1%. So if I did that times 9, that would give me 9%. And then I could add those two together. Oh my goodness, that's a really tricky way of doing it. To work out 99%, there's a much easier way. And in SATs questions, I will tell you, a lot of children try and do the method I've just shown you. But it's much easier to know that 1% of the number, so let's say of 16, is 0.16. But then take that away from the 100%, the whole. So rather than counting up to 99, count back to it. You know your 100% is 16, because that's all of it, that's the whole. just take your 1% away. So it's much easier to do 16 take away 0.16 than to go all around the houses and work out 9 lots of 10% and 9 lots of 1% and try and add it all together. Much, much easier to do it that way. I won't answer that question that's on the board now. I'll let you guys see if you can work out 99% of 16. Okay. So the first part of the work you're going to be doing today is finding 1% and 10% of a number. So for example, on here, 1% of 500. So you're doing 500 divided by 100. Nice and easy. Then you're finding 10% of 500. So in that case, you're doing 500 divided by 10. Nice and easy. Have a go at filling in that half of the sheet, just the 1% and the 10%. Pause this video and have a go at doing that, and then come back to me for the next part. I'll see you in a second. Okay, I hope you didn't find that too bad. The next part of the sheet asks you to use those familiar fractions, like the 1%, the 10%, the 25 or the quarter, the 50 or the half, to work out these percentages. So instead of 1 and 10, you've got some other ones here. So let's just do 1 or 2 of these, because if I do all of them, I'll have answered the sheet for you. So we did 500 last time, so I'm going to do 500 again. So we worked out that to work out 10% of 500, we did 500 divided by 10. That was 50. So I know 10%. If I know 10%, how can I use that to find 20%? It's going to be double. So 20% of 500 is 100. How can I use 10% to work out 90%? I could times my 10% by 9, or I could use the method that I showed you earlier in working out 99%, which is to start with your 100% and take away 10%. So my 100% is 500, that's the whole thing, and then I could take away my 10% to get me to 90. 500 take away 50 is 450. Oh, that 5's not very clear, is it? Okay, I won't do any more on that one because I'll have answered it for you. But let's have a look at this one down here. To find 5% of a number, if you already know 10%, what would you need to do to your 10%? You'd need to halve it. So if you found 10% of 1,220, which I'll just tell you for now, to find 5%, you've got to halve that. So that would be half of 100 is 50, half of 22 is 11. So add those together, that would be 5%. So use your familiar fraction. Oh, that was the wrong button. Use your familiar fraction to work out the new fraction. 40%, well, that will be your 10% 4 times. So I know 10% of 1,500 is 150. 150 4 times. 4 lots of 100 is 400. 4 lots of 50 is 200. Add those together. So 40% is 600. You can also do a rough guess here, because I know that 40% is 10% less than 50%, which is half. And if I had a number as my answer that's bigger than a half of my whole, I know I can't be right. But half of 1,500 is 750. And this is lower than that, but not too much lower, so I know I'm on the right lines. Okay, then 80%. Well, I could do 100% take away 2 lots of 10, or I could do 10% times 8. So you could choose which method you want to do there. Now, This last one's a bit trickier. 25% is not too bad. That's a quarter. So remember, to find a quarter, you are dividing by 4. So you would need to do 230 divided by 4, or half and half again. So half of that would be 115. Half of that, we're going to need a decimal here. Well, half of that is 50. Half of 15 is 7.5. So it's 57.5. How can we use that to work out 27%? Well, 27% is 2 more percent than 25. So I would need to find 1% of 230, and I'd need that twice. 1% of 230 is that. Now, do you remember I said when you work with money, that's the only time you use a zero? There it is. £2.30 is 1%. I need that twice. So that would be £4.60. That's my 2%. So then I would need to add that to 57.5. Now, did you spot my mistake over here? We're working with money, so what did I need? I needed the extra zero and the pound sign. I forgot that zero. Don't do that. Don't do what I did. So if I were to add those together, 7 and 4 is 11, add the 1 is 12. £62. Might not have room for all this. And 10 pence is my 27%. Okay, this is tricky today, guys. I am not going to lie, it is tricky. I want you to try and do the best you can with it. Okay, really have a go, see how much you can work out. If you manage to finish that and you've done okay with it, there are 2 destination questions here. So you can pause the screen on these 2 questions and have a go at doing these. So if you manage to get the sheet done, have a look at these 2 destination questions and see how you do with those. Okay, and I will speak to you all tomorrow and see most of you on Monday. Good luck.